Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Well, welcome everybody. I'm recording this at the start of term for 2022. You might be listening to a replay, but I just wanted to let you know there are lots of great ways to learn this term. I've got some free live webinars. Please check your emails because I've sent out one for the first webinar for this term, which will be an hour of power on early childhood. And in a moment, I'm going to do a deep dive into the ebook that goes along with that webinar. And look, it doesn't matter what age and stage you're with, you might find this interesting anyway, but up to you. There is also this term, I'm running 2 live virtual workshops. So if you're a person that prefers to join me on Zoom on the day, the evaluations from those days has been amazing. It means that you can join me from anywhere and you don't have to worry about where you're sitting, people in your way, car parking. I mean, really, those live virtual days are fabulous. They're fast moving, they're fun. I'll send you a show bag with goodies in them for the day. So make sure you register ASAP so I can get those goodie bags to you. They are being run, one is being run Queensland time and one Sydney time, just with the daylight savings differences. So one's Australian Eastern Daylight Time and one's I get the words standard time and daylight time. But anyway, have a look on my website and I hope you can join me for those days. And then I've got the online on demand. So if you're the sort of person that prefers just to watch at your own pace, same courses, you can do myself, Tony Atwood, early childhood. So you can do any of those. And the free online webinars, if you're not sure which course is for you, are open for the next 2 weeks till the 23rd of October. So you can watch those webinars for 40 minutes, they're mainly 40 minutes, and they just give you a taste of what it's like to do the online on demand. Now, some people just watch it a whole course in a day, knock off the 5 hours. Some people like to do an hour a week. Some watch it over a couple of sessions over a weekend. I suppose it's a bit like a Netflix special or Netflix. It depends if you're a binge watcher or you like to pace it out. But the online on-demand courses have been so popular, and if you're looking to do some training in Term 4, I highly recommend you think about any of those courses. They really are fantastic, and the evaluations and feedback from those have been incredible. So just a few different ways to learn, and then later on this start of November or end of October, I'll be doing the transition to 2023, doing a live webinar. We did one last year where I just get people thinking about how do we prepare children to start school, to transition between classrooms, to transition to secondary, and that's sort of like an hour of power deep dive into getting kids ready, what are the strategies, and lots of my cheat sheets. So make sure you keep an eye out for my emails. I highly recommend that you do make sure that I'm whitelisted or safe, because I do send about an email a week, and that's because there's so many things I want to share with you. So make sure you keep an eye out on those emails. And what I'm doing this term, the one that you get this week, you can click how you want to learn. So if you want to do the early childhood webinar, you'll just click that, and then I won't send you the other information. You know, if you want to do the online on demand, then I'll try. So I'm going to try and not overwhelm your inbox. I try my best, but it can be really hard because then I like to let you know about my podcasts, and like next week's podcast is 30 reasons why children have trouble sitting. So that'll be a really good podcast. So, I want to let you know it's out because some of you aren't subscribers. In fact, I'd encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you always get that alert when a new podcast drops. Because if you don't always see my emails, you might miss some episodes, but up to you how you find that best. So I am super excited. First time ever, I'm doing a live virtual webinar for early childhood. And the reason I'm doing this is last term, I was inundated, absolutely inundated every day with emails from early childhood educators saying, Sue, I've got a child who's, undiagnosed because of COVID. Haven't got early intervention. They're on a waiting list. What should I do? And I just got so many emails. I was like, I need to do something. You know me, I call myself a pracademic, which is a practical academic. As soon as I start hearing things from my audience, like that was why I did the Calm Corners last term. You know, my beautiful community, let me know you need help, and then I try and help in any way that I can. So what I did at the end of last term, I sent out an email saying, I'm going to do a webinar. Let me know what questions you've got. And I had over 1,000 questions come in, and I have been going through all of them and sorting which are the priorities, what people need to know, so that I can make sure this webinar is an hour jam-packed with strategies and ideas. So the hour webinar, we're going to look at identifying the signs of neurodiversity in the early years. We're going to give you the confidence to sensitively encourage parents and guardians to seek diagnosis. What are the strategies to help children if they have a diagnosis or not? How do you support play and social skills and group time? How do you provide additional support for families, particularly of non-English speaking background? And how do you balance and accommodate all of the children's needs in a busy, complex early years setting? So in the Hour of Power, that's what we're going to do a deep dive into. But then what I've done is looked at all the other things you wanted help with, and I've created an ebook that includes like some of those, what to look for diagnosis, toilet training, non-verbal, communicating, engaging, all sorts of things. So this podcast, I'm going to do a bit of a dive into what's in the early childhood ebook. Now, there's over 100 tips and strategies, so I'm not going to cover all of them, but I just thought I've looked at your questions. So for example, Hayley and Carolyn and Kerry and Katie and Nadia all wanted to know about diagnosis, like what are the red flags? So in the ebook on page 1, 2, and 3, there's some great strategies about understanding how hard diagnosis is, that autism spectrum affects social, communication, motor, behaviour, sensory. And then I've got what signs to look for. And there's some really helpful things there, like are they showing interest? Are they bringing items to you? Are they following your gaze? Do they engage in pretend play? All of these great things that I'd encourage you to go and read the signs to look for. So if you haven't downloaded the ebook, can I recommend you do that? If you've signed up for the webinar, it's either on the webinar page that has like the handout where you can send me questions, or the ebook's on there. But if you haven't, or if you don't get my emails, you can actually go and sign up for the ebook on the podcast page on the episode today. So make sure you go to this episode and download the ebook. I recommend having it on your phone or your iPad. It's just such a good way to do it, and also can be invaluable to refer back to. I recommend you print out some of these things for families. You could spend hours trying to find some of this information, whereas I'm trying to put it in a condensed version for you so that you can go, oh, okay, doesn't understand simple instructions like give the block to me, show me the dog. That's helpful to know that these are the things that we'd be looking for. So I highly recommend you have a look at that, and even print that out and talk to your colleagues and have a think how you can talk to the families. And as I say, in the webinar, I'll talk to you more about that. The second tip sheet is really based on, many of you wanted to know, how do you engage this child? So Laura and Esther and Christy all ask questions around how to engage children who learn differently. And for children who learn differently or engage differently, we need to teach differently. We need to think about that child. Now, in my early childhood 5-hour course, I go through like the stages of development and the stages of play, observing where the child's at. But part of that course, I also go through different ways of teaching. And I think this was invaluable to put in the ebook, just to give you that context that in a play-based curriculum or early childhood curriculum, sometimes you're going to have to directly teach your child something. You're going to have to take them into a quiet environment and sit and maybe teach them how to point to something or how to hand you a visual, or if you're doing a now, next, later visual. You might start off doing that when all the children are outside, just coming in and I know you haven't got a lot of time, spending a couple of minutes directly teaching a child something. Just like if you're teaching them how to tie their shoelaces, you do that as a one-on-one. So think, how can I actually find a moment to directly teach them a skill? The next way, I call it engineered, where you're going to set up those situations. So let's pretend we're teaching a child to point. We might have that where we do a direct teaching where we sit and we might go hand over hand and show them how to point to something they want in a very direct way. An engineered situation is where I might set up a situation, so I have their barbecue shapes or an apple, and I get them to point to that at eating time, where I actually create an opportunity where I go, okay, at eating time, I'm going to make them point to the cup to have the drink in, or I'm going to get them to point to the puzzle they want. I'm going to actually set up situations where they have to point, okay? Then incidental. There'll be times that come up every day you can teach a child to point. So you can think of all the little incidental ways. And then you might actually have some activities where you set up that they have to point to things, like they might like playing with Lego, and they might have to point to the person they want or the blue block. Think about getting them to point to things. But the big one for me is you have to make learning fun. For many of my children, we have to make it engaging and fun, and you might have to be animated, or you might have to, if they love the Lego, think, how can I make Lego fun? Or Duplo, if they love Mobilo, or whatever that, how are you going to make it fun? Then I would be looking at, well, how can I adapt strategies? And the one people forget the most is what I call backward training, which is where often the child's we expect them to do the whole puzzle. Well, how about they just do the last piece? Or we expect them to colour in the whole thing. What if they just have to colour in one bit, the last bit? So they get to experience success. A lot of my children, because they have a short attention span, we need to make the activity shorter. And one way to make it shorter is actually to just get them to do the last step. Instead of packing everything up, how about they just put the last couple of trains in? Think, how can they do the last couple of steps? Or if you want them to open their barbecue shapes, you might ease it open and they just have to do the last pull of that, the back on the shoelaces. If you're teaching a child to put their shoes on, you might actually put the whole shoe on and all they have to do is one Velcro. Or, think, how can I just give them the last step? And that makes it more fun because they feel more successful. Imagine if you didn't complete anything. You would start to get stressed and anxious. So think how you can make it fun and adapt those activities. But on this page, I would love all of you to have a look on this page in the ebook where it says, the click of the camera button captures the perfect action shot, okay? So find the perfect moment to teach. Observe the child, get to notice the signs of the perfect moment. When you take a photo, 1 second before, you could have had a horrible face. 1 second after, you could have had a horrible face. You've got to find that sweet spot, that perfect photo. So when the child's calm and happy, that might be the time to teach them to point. When the child's come and sat at the table happily to have their barbecue shapes, that might be the day to help them open them, not the day they're upset, anxious and dysregulated. So much it is about finding those perfect moments. Now, I know you're all busy, you've got a lot of kids to care for, but just try and find those perfect little moments if you can. The next page was about how and why to use visuals, and a number of people wanted to know about working with nonverbal children, and visuals are so important with children with limited communication. But the reason visuals are also important because many children have difficulty with auditory processing. Your words disappear, whereas a visual stays up. But there are lots of ways to use visuals. So you can have photos, you can have the environments of visual. There are so many different ways. But just remember, you still need to allow the child process to look at the picture, make sure the picture means something to them, and use lots of different visuals. One of my tips is be eclectic with your visuals and always add speech with the visuals. So we won't just be using visuals, we'll be actually using our words as well. Now, the other question a lot of people had about how to engage the child. And Laura, Esther, Christy, and Wendy, I know I talked about different ways of thinking, but I also think part of it is how you communicate with the child. So I've got down about being a supportive communication partner, because some of our children, we use too many words. It has to be clear and concise, one step at a time. Those of you who've done my courses, I call this I'm being a GPS. Think how a GPS talks, a calm, monotone voice. It actually, though for some of my children, you might have to be dramatic, as it says in the instructions. But you shouldn't be using more words than the child. Probably just 1 or 2 more words than the child. And please do not insist they look at you. Your aim is that they understand. And many people on the spectrum tell us eye contact is painful. So as long as they're looking in your general direction or processing what you're saying, some children actually, to process, to stay calm, will be stimming, but actually listening. I look for a look in their eyes to know if they are listening. And part of being a good communication partner is to know what they look like. What does their face look like when they're focused? What does their face look like when they're anxious? Really think about how to understand them. Look for their body posture. Look for the cues that they're engaged and ready to listen. So I think a lot of us, when we're working with young children, is understanding that child, understanding how they communicate, understanding how they listen. And then we can actually engage that child by looking for that perfect camera moment and then thinking, well, how can I engage them? Is it a visual? How am I going to communicate? How am I going to use my words? But for those of you who have non-verbal children or limited speech and wanted to build language, Megan and Danielle, I have included how to create a communication enriched environment, which is, again, all about thinking about what visuals and photos are you going to use. How can you help the child engage and communicate? One of my favourite ways is to get an old-fashioned lunchbox, and some of them you might have to be a clear a lunchbox, because if the child doesn't have object permanence, once it's they can't see it, it doesn't exist. And then on top, you might put a picture of their sandwich and their apple. And they need to hand you the sandwich and you put the sandwich in the lunchbox. They need to hand you the apple and you put the apple in the lunchbox. That's picture exchange communication. You might have a board where the child hands you a picture of the train set and you give them the trains. So setting up those little opportunities to create communication. And they're just quick little things you can do every day. So in the ebook, I've got how you can create a communication environment at home and at school. And there's some great ways that you can do that in the ebook and some nice visuals to show you. On the next page is really what we need to think about for many of our children, and that is making that program engaging and motivating, but by using the things they love, by extending them, by helping them do new things, but letting them know when they're going to do the things they love. So I was talking to a preschool teacher last week. They have a student that loves Mobilo. It might be trains, it might be bubbles, whatever it is. But on this page in the ebook, we've got the now, next, later. And I highly recommend you put a photo of the child, maybe write their name as well, and do the now, next, later. And you can actually, now we're doing the puzzle, next we're doing bubbles, later you can go outside. Be clear what they're going to do. Personally, I like to have the thing they like in the next, in the middle, because otherwise they'll think they're doing bubbles forever or Mobilo forever, and often they won't get off that. If you watch SBS, they often have now, next, later. So what shows on now, what's on next, what's on later. So I highly recommend you think, well, what is your goal? What do you want them to be able to do? And it might just be 1 minute on that activity, 1 minute doing something, a non-preferred activity. And then you can just extend it a little bit at a time. But the big thing is, and it's on this page, that never use the thing they love as punishment. Don't say they can't have it. Tell them what they need to do. Now we're going to do, a puzzle. Next we'll do Mobilo. Later you can read a book. Be very clear what they're going to do. And that is where your visuals can really support you to do that. Now, lots of you had children who are having trouble self-regulating and with anxiety. Judy, Sandy, Sally, all had things around this. Now, in the younger years, many children have trouble self-regulating. There are sort of stages of children learning to self-regulate. Remember, first of all, they might rely on you to self-regulate. Some of my children struggle to self-regulate. And I do recommend you have a look at that, setting up a calm corner and ways to do that. But in the ebook, I've actually got some calming activities and some alerting activities, because some children actually need more alerting sensory activities. Some of my children are tired and lethargic. Some need calming activities like slow rocking or soft music or stretching or chewing or fidgeting. And many of my children in the young years do use their stimming, which is self-stimulation, to calm. And you do need to let them have that time. One of my little boys would love to just go out in the playground and play with leaves. You know, one of my little girls liked to sing songs to calm herself, to give herself that self-regulation. So you need to think about, how can I give them those preventative breaks? How can I give them time to self-soothe? That's really what it is. When children are dysregulated, they need time to soothe. Now, of course, I want to teach them how to self-regulate too, and emotional regulation. But that might be you putting in more preventative breaks, making sure they've been to the toilet, had a drink, had something to eat. I'm always shocked how many of my children are not eating, drinking, and going to the toilet. And remember, that would have a massive impact on your ability to self-soothe and calm. And then I've got some information in the ebook on using sensory tools to improve behaviour. So again, this is where you might have those tools in a basket in a tent for some children. But some children need big body breaks. They need to go and throw things or hang on the monkey bars. So you need to think about, well, how can I use sensory toys or tools? Do they need a weighted thing on them? Do they need something to chew? Do they need the wooden hand massager that I've got in here that many of the children love? But so often, if they are seeing an occupational therapist, that is the ideal person to ask, what does the child need? Do you need to wrap them up in something weighted? What will help this child actually self-regulate? And then the aim is that at first you might be helping them regulate, but they will seek those out and use them, or you might build in those preventative breaks. Now, the other one that lots and lots of people wanted to help with, including Nico, Adele, Christy, was toilet training. So I have included my top 10 tips for toilet training that I recommend you print out and give to parents. The number one thing to remember is don't wait for signs of readiness. So many people are waiting. I'll wait. I was devastated last week on my Facebook page. I put up something on getting children out of nappies, and I had parents who had 8 and 9-year-olds still in nappies. Now, somebody needs to help these families earlier. And I find that a lot of parents are like, I was waiting. It's once they're 4, you've waited long enough. You need to get on with it. And it needs to be toilet timing, not toilet training. So by that, I mean they need to have a routine where they're taken regularly. Now, if you've got a child who's wetting their pants and you're taking them every half an hour, that's because they've been in nappies for too long. They've actually lost bladder control. The longer you leave it, the weaker those muscles get. Think of yourself, you build up those muscles. Many teachers, we have to build up those muscles, and after the holidays, often you haven't built up that bladder for a whole session, If you've ever had a baby, you'll know you need to build those muscles up. So, my number one tip is avoid potties. And I had a parent last week on that Facebook go, my son's on a potty and I can't get him on the toilet. I say start with the toilet. Start with the end in mind. Make sure you use visuals, and have a look at the fabulous podcast I did with a mum on twins, on toilet training twins earlier this year. And she included in that podcast, we included a beautiful visual she was using with her daughter. And anyway, you can have a look. But remember, at first you're going to have to take them really regularly. They have been weeing in a nappy for so long, and I find you've just got to knuckle down. But the other tip I haven't included here, and parents, I would love you to start thinking about this. Do they actually know what a toilet is? Have they ever been in the bathroom? Do they know the procedure? you just go off there and come out. They have no idea what you're doing. So there's no such thing as oversharing when it comes to teaching toilet training. And this is often where if you've got a sibling, it's great to do it at the same time, or other children that you're doing no nappies. So the first step in the preschool or at home, start taking them with other children, getting them involved in the process, even if they're flushing, putting toilet paper in, flushing, washing their hands. Just get them involved in the process. I have toilet trained hundreds of kids, but the first step is that. Letting them see what the environment's like, desensitizing them to the sensory. Actually, showing them what happens in there, the pants down, up, toilet paper. Lots of my children have only ever used wipes. You might need to keep using wipes. You can get those flushable wipes now, which is good, but some of them might be used to normal wipes, and wiping isn't the priority. Often my children, the motor skills to wipe your bottom and the sensory if you get poo on your hands. I know some of you are going, oh my goodness, I've got a child that loves smearing poo. I know that we have extremes, don't we? But please think about getting on top of that. So a few things to think about. Please make sure you register to join me for the Early Years 1 Hour of Power webinar. When I surveyed everyone, they said Wednesday night was the preference from 6 till 7. Now, personally, I don't normally like doing webinars that late, but I know for many of you, if you're teaching in early childhood or working in early childhood, that would make sense, especially if you're at a long daycare. So it's going to be 6 till 7. There will be a replay, but you need to register so I know to send you the replay. And once you can click I want the replay or I want to join you live, okay? And if you don't make it on the day, totally understand. I'll still be sending the replay out to you. There will be prizes for both the replay and the joining live people. It's always a good hour of power. Obviously, I haven't done this topic before, but in the past when I've done this, it's been so well received. So I look forward to seeing you all at the early childhood. Anyone with children under 6, I highly recommend that you sign up for that. And if you have listened to this and you're with older children, I still think there might be some good tips in the ebook, but make sure you watch the online on-demand webinars. Tony Attwood, I always say, I talk about Tony Attwood's a psychologist. He does what is autism. I'm a teacher. I do what to do. So if you haven't watched the Tony Attwood webinar, I highly recommend you watch that. And it includes girls on the spectrum, lots of interesting things about diagnosis. So I highly recommend you watch that. And they're available to the 23rd of October. So I hope that, or join me for the live virtual. Lots to think about. And look, if you are a regular podcast listener, I would love you to please leave a rating on whatever you listen, just so other people find this podcast. So the more people, you don't even have to write a comment. You can just give it a star rating, because the more people that rate it, the more that people like Apple or however people listen, Spotify, they will let people know about like popular podcasts. So I highly recommend you take a moment and just hit how many stars. I'd love you to write a comment. Just can be like, really helpful, or what was your favorite episode, or what tips you enjoyed. But I really hope that you can just take a moment and rate the podcast for me today. That would be amazing. And I look forward to connecting with all of you along the way this term. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out, and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.